Hi everyone, my name is Nate Chamberlain. I'm the co-director of the Lawrence SharePoint user group, and I'm here with Suzanne Hunt, who's going to be sharing how you can do more with PowerShell and Office 365. I'll go ahead and hand it over to her.
Good morning, everyone. Well, morning, afternoon, good day. It's 6 o'clock in the morning here, so forgive me for maybe a little bit waffly. So I've been working with SharePoint for best part of 12 years now, and then I have been working with PowerShell itself for the last 7 or 8 years. A friend of mine who I was working with about back then made the suggestion that if you're going to work with SharePoint, that maybe the best way to do is PowerShell. So I spent some time and I've been learning about it for the last 7 years. So these are the 6 reasons Microsoft have given us as to why we should be using PowerShell for Office 365. So the 365 Admin Center has more information than what we see through the graphical user interface. There are features that you can only configure using PowerShell. If you need to do bulk operations, we can do that rather than logging on to each site, each library, each list. We can do it all at once. We can filter data. So if we want to see a group of sites that are made by a specific template, we can do that. You can export the data out to HTML, to CSV, Excel, and you have the ability to manage across multiple products. So Office 365, as you know, is a platform, so you can manage your email settings, you can manage SharePoint, you can manage Teams, you can manage Planner now. So it's quite a broad ability. So PowerShell itself comes as part of Windows 7 and later versions. So if you want to check your version, it's just a simple command. So you can see on my screen there, hopefully, that just by running.
Suzanne, I think we're seeing the wrong monitor. We see the Go to Webinar right now.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, there we go. That looks good.
Hang on. Okay.
Perfect.
So there we see that we have the major version of 5, minor version 1, and a build number. So basically, if you've got version 5 or later, you can run some simple commands to install the PowerShell modules that you want. So the key ones that I would suggest are the SharePoint, the Microsoft Online SharePoint PowerShell. This command here will do that, will install that quite easily. If you don't have PowerShell 5 or later, oops, you need to run this as an administrator. Mental note. If you don't have version 5 or later, you can download the module itself from Microsoft and install it, and then any updates after that can be installed via these command lines. The other two that you would want to install is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices PowerShell Online module. This one, it has about 430 modules, commandlets available for you to use. The first one has about 170, which when Microsoft first put out the SharePoint Online module, they only had 70, so they've increased it quite a bit. And the other one you want is the Azure AD, which allows management of groups and a lot of the Azure side. So what I like to do is I like to have a script that runs through all of the connection sessions so that you're connected to everything that you need all at once. Now you want to do this probably at the top of any of your scripts that you write, because if you change, as you can see, I've got multiple tabs open, but if you swap between tabs, the connection is per tab. So what I'll do now is I'll just go over to, we'll start with doing some of the SharePoint Online tricks. So you can see here, we want to use the connect SPO service, and then you have your admin URL, which goes to your SharePoint admin center. And then we just do this little get credential, which means that we don't need to save any credentials onto the page. All right, so now that we're connected, one of the first things we can see is this command get SPO tenant, which will give you a bunch of your tenant information. So you can see the results are quite a lot. Now, I find that combined with this command here, get SPO site, which will give you a list of all your site collections. And on this side, as you can see, there's not too many. But I combine those with a bit of HTML and CSS, and we can create a report. So you can see here, I've got getting the tenant information, and I'm interested in the storage quota and its sharing capability. And then I want to go through and get each site, get the title, the URL, the owner, the template, the storage quota, and its current storage usage, so you can see how your growth is going, and the number of subsites that it uses. And then we're going to output that to an HTML file. So if we run that, run the script. Like that. And here you see that we have the storage quota and the sharing capability at the tenant site. And then underneath, you can see the title of each subsite or each site, the URL, any declared owner, what template was used, the storage quota, and the used, so you can track what's going on. So I find quite often that run this once a month or every couple of months, and you can sort of have a look at particularly how your usage is going, so that if you need to buy more storage, or you want to see what's going on. The other one that you can have a look, that you can add to here, is the ability to get external users. So we all like to share, but you just want to know who's your site being shared with. So there are some commands that you can do that as well. I'll share these scripts with you after this webinar, and I'll add the external user site to that as well. Now, you would have heard me talk about templates. If you want to see what a particular template is being used by a particular site, you can use these two commands here. So this first bit here with the $sign is basically declaring a variable. And then we want to use the get SPO site for this site and store it into the variable. There we go. And then you use the variable and then a period and then template. There we go, we'll see down the bottom here where it says we're using template group #0. Now, the other way you can look at what is available is as soon as you use the period, you'll get a drop down and you can see all these different options that you can have a look at. I find this one quite interesting as well, the default sharing link type. So for each site, what's the default share? And this one has none. But sometimes it will be read-only, or you can set it to edit. So what else have we got here? So you can use this to disable flows. Not that you would want to do that, I don't think. You can say, is it a hub site? When was the last content modified? So is this site still active? Sorry. So you can see my demo site was last modified on the 31st of March. And you can see down the bottom here all these different options. And this webs count, that is the number of subsites. Now, once you've got the patterns and practices module installed, you can start using the extra commands available from there. Now, the patterns and practices it's an open source initiative. It's looked after by SharePoint Engineering, and there's a whole lot of documentation and samples and reusable controls. It's not just PowerShell, it's a whole lot of information there. If you're interested in it, I'll share the link with you. But I have a particular interest in the PowerShell aspect of it. So once again, we need to connect to the site using, rather than the SPO connection that we used above, this one is connect Pnp online. Now, if you've got multi-factor authentication enabled on your tenant, instead of using the get credential, you can use this command here, which just says use web login, and that will bring up a pop-up. And once you're finished, you got to make sure you remember to use disconnect to PNP online. It just closes your sessions. So some of the PNP commands that are useful, once again, you can get the subsites, but instead of having to use the get SPO site and then look through the results of that, there's a direct command that we can use here to get the subsites. Because this site has no subsites, I don't get a result. Another good useful one is who gets your access request emails. So if people don't have access to a site and you want to know who's receiving it, this is your command. Once again, it hasn't been set up. But then you can use the set request emails, and then you set this. Now if we go back and look at the get, you can see that the request emails has been set to my email. So that means that if someone goes to the site and they fill in that form that says, please give me access, this is where the email goes to. Now, we can use like we said, the get SPO site in order to get all of those, set all sites to be set to this. So just bear with me. Oops. So by doing that, which means this pipe command means that you can feed information through from multiple commands. So for every site, we want to set the request access email. Oops. Obviously we can't with that command. My apologies. So the patterns and practices have released some diagnostic information. So we've got these measure commands, which I hadn't seen before until just recent. So I've been playing around with them a little bit. So you can see that the simple command, so we're looking at the documents library. There's no items in there. There's no versions. There's 3 folders and it has a total file size here. This one is quite interesting that they add this, the broken permission count. So that means that if there's items in their folder or in that library that has unique permissions, it'll give you a count. So I think that's quite nice. Now, it also looks like the next command that I thought was interesting was a response time. So how fast is your connection? So it does a whole lot of measures. And there we go. It says that on a round trip, there's an average of 116 milliseconds. The maximum was 320 and a minimum of 85. So that's a pretty good connection. I'm happy with that. This measure PnP web let's run that. Now you can see that it's giving me a nice little progress bar there. So for my demo site, once again we get a web count, so there's no subsites. We have 7 lists. There are 262 files. We have 2 items. And we have a total file size here. There are 6 users on the site, and there are 3 groups. So that's quite useful, I find. Now let's go through here. We won't go through all of these, but you can see you can add files, you can add folders, you can get items inside of a folder. So this get PnP folder item means that you can get all files inside of my demo site. But there is nothing. Now, let's just have a quick look at some of these graph commands, and then I'll move on. Now, to get these, some of these commands, like we want to get a list of all Office 365 groups, we need to change our connect scope. So we want to be able to, the scopes gives you define how you're connecting. So do you want to just read, or do you want to read write? Now, this read write group and read of the directory is what I use to connect to these groups. That's it. Now, if we run the get command, right, so we can see that there are 4 Office 365 groups on my site. We have a demo group, we've got a human resources group, marketing, and Sue's test. Now, let's see, who are the owners of the group? So there's a specific command, get PnP unified group owners. You just enter in the group title. And there we go. And once again, you can do the same thing to get group members. Now lastly, even though I don't have anything to show for on this site, you can get all workflow instances that are running on a site, and you can stop and start them using PowerShell. So that is quite useful. Just to note that these refer to standard SharePoint workflows, so the ones that you would have created in SharePoint Designer, as opposed to flow. So now this is all great, but it all requires some manual intervention for you to run this on your computer. Now, what I have done, and I've found quite useful now, is if you've heard of site designs and site scripts, where you can create a template that you want to apply to sites or new sites or any existing sites. These are fairly new. They've been around for maybe a year or two. Now, what I have done is you can create a template out of an existing site, and there is the command to do that where you can get provisioning template. So you connect to a site, and then you can create a template, which is just an XML file, and then you connect to your new site and apply it. Now, once again, this is great, but all very manual. We can set it up so that this can be applied on creation using Flow. Now, when you create this site script, now we'll start with sorry, let me go back to the beginning. It does require Azure, and we do need to set up a few things first. So first thing we need to do is we need to create a client ID. So there is excuse me. No. So if we go here, no, not that one there either. There we go. So to create a client ID, so this allows you to create the client ID. It's like a log-on ability. So you have an ID, which is when I hit generate, it's a standard GUID format, and then you want to create a secret, which is like your password. And then you give it a title. I've got one already called site provisioning, so let's just go call it that. App domain, we always want to use localhost, and HTTPS localhost. So, and then when you hit create, which I won't do here because I've already created one, that saves that. You want to save your client ID and your client secret because you're going to need that when we go to the permissions. Now you need to, because we need to trust it. So to do that, we go here. Now the app ID that you created, the client ID, you want to paste that into there and then hit lookup. And then you need to tell it what permissions you want that to have. And we want it to have full control. Now, this will all be part of the notes that will get sent out. So because this is already created, I won't hit create, but once you hit create, it will give you the app permissions needed to do this for your site provisioning. Next thing we need is Azure Queue Storage. So to do that, I need to go to the Azure portal. So portal.azure.com. And then from there, we create a storage account. And as you can see, I have a storage account. Now
Hey, Suzanne.
Yeah.
We have a question from Christine who's watching. She says, this is informative. What would you say is the best resource that defines each command per SPO module? She says she found the following and included the link in the question panel. But if you have another, she's wondering if you'll share.
Oh, absolutely. Now, just a second, Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do have, no, sorry, I can't see the link that you've got. The best resource I've found is the actual GitHub page. Let me just quickly find that for you. So on docs.microsoft.com, there's a SPO reference for the PowerShell, which is really useful. And for the patterns and practices, so this is the patterns and practices PowerShell GitHub. And then you've got all of this information here. And this has been moved to docs.microsoft.com. So here's a lot of the information that I've given you is sitting here. And here's an overview of the different commandlets. And I've broken it down by, say, commandlets related to apps, some base commandlets, so in regards to authentication and Azure. So there is a lot, branding. client side, content types. Now, as you can see, the patterns and practices PowerShell can also be used on SharePoint on-prem. So, and that's what this platform column here indicates. So they've done a lot of work on this, and it's really quite useful. So here's the those measure diagnostics that I showed you. Document sets, features. So if you wanted to add a file to a site, this is the command that you'd use. And here's the detailed information on how you could use it. So hopefully that answers your question, Christine.
Thanks, Suzanne. And I shared a couple of those links in the chat as well.
Great. Awesome. Right, so let's go back into Azure. Now we needed a queue, like in the storage account, we need to create a queue. So this is where messages get put that need to be processed. So as you scroll down, we can see the queues here. And then if we need to add a new one, as you can see, we just use the plus sign up the top here. Now I've got my Pnp provisioning queue already set up. So we just need to, when you set it up, you tell it which storage account to use. So you use the same one as we set up originally. I'm just having a look to see if there's anything sitting here. No, there's not. So that's all we need to do. You just need to have a queue sitting there. Then you need to create a flow. So it's a fairly simple flow. The trigger is when an HTTP request is received. Now, when you first get this, the URL here is not filled in. It's a fairly simple JSON schema, and it's always the same for this. The important bit here is the web URL. So that is the web URL of the site that we are creating. And then the next bit is put a message in a queue. The queue name is the queue that we've just created in Azure, and the web URL from the above. And as you can see, when you under the dynamic content, that web URL is sitting right there. And that's it. When you hit save, the URL up here is generated. And that URL is what we need to add into the next step. So you need to save that. And then we need to create an Azure function. So we've already got our storage account, and we've got a queue. And then we will need to go to a function app. Now, one thing we need to note, there are more details on how to create these steps. Now, let me just quickly grab it and I'll put it in the chat for you. So these steps in this page contain everything that you need to know for setting this up. Actually, Nate, can you share that, please?
Yep, absolutely.
So one thing we do need to note with these function apps is that by default, when you create one, it is created as version 2, which we will see in here under the function app settings. So when this loads, so under the function app settings, it's usually set to version 2. In order to run PowerShell, we need to set it back to version 1. So you do that and hit save, and then we need to restart the function, which you can do up here. So let's just restart. Okay. Then once you do that, once you get hitting on the plus button, you can create, now actually this is the other thing, experimental language support. Even though it's not really experimental, we need to enable that in order to get PowerShell. So the function that we want to create is a queue trigger, which is this one here. You select the language, which is PowerShell. Give it a name. And let's use the same queue that we created before. Now, it is a quirk of this, we cannot have capitals at the start. And that is fine. So let's hit create. There we go. So you get a simple PowerShell generated. We'll just go back to one above. So this is where we can add in what PowerShell that you need. So we can see here, but we've got the in, which is what's being sent in. So the get content, so that will get the web URL that we've declared in our flow. Then we're going to connect to my demo portal, which is the site that I want to use as a template. We get the provisioning template, so that uses that current site and creates the XML template. Then we connect to the new URL, so this is the one that's just been created. And then we apply the provisioning template. So fairly straightforward once you know what you're doing. So, and then once we've done that, and we've run, now after we've completed that, the next step is we need to go back to PowerShell. And we've got these site scripts. So the site script that I use just creates the link to our flow. So you remember the flow at the top, we generated a URL. Now this is the URL to that flow. And we've given it a name of apply template. So what we need to do is connect to our admin site. We add the site script, so we've got this script here. We've given it a title and the content. And once you've done that, you can test. So we'll just quickly connect this. Oops, wrong one. No, it is that one. Right. So once we're connected, because I've already created this site script, we want to have a look. Get SPO site script will tell you all your site scripts. So you can see here that I've been playing with the SharePoint starter kit, which has created these two site scripts, the Contoso Electronics team site and Contoso Electronics communication site. But then we see we've got this one here, which is our apply Pnp provisioning template. So there is the site scripts available there. Now, to add the site design, and I know it gets a bit confusing, there is some good information available on docs.microsoft.com about the differences between site scripts and site designs. So to add the site design, we want to add our provisioning template. This is the ID, as you can see here, this ID here from our provisioning template. We want to set it that all web templates with the ID of 64. Now that is the groups template. And we want to set it to the default. So run that. I can see it. That's been applied. We have the ID, site script ID is default is true. So now we can go get SPO site design. And it's been, you can see it's been applied twice. So it is sitting there. And then we can test it, which I won't do because it can take a little bit of time. And that's basically it. So once the site design and scripts have been applied to your tenant, and then you've got a new site, it gets created. That's all we need to do. So that you've got the default is set to run that site design, which calls the flow, which calls the apply template commands. So, how was that? Was that useful?
Yes, thank you so much, Suzanne. I learned a lot. I don't do a lot of PowerShell myself. Co-director Greg also adds it's super useful. Just a reminder to all attendees, you will get a recording to the presentation today in your email. It takes about an hour or so. If you do want to go back and revisit any of the steps that Suzanne shared. Also, we've been tweeting using hashtag LSPUG if you want to go back and see any screenshots, and Suzanne might take a look and see if there's any comments or so on there that she can reply to if you have additional questions.
Absolutely.
Also, any resources that Suzanne wants to share, we can send out in a follow-up email.
Absolutely.
Naveen Carla is watching and is wondering if there are any backup and restore options using PowerShell.
Yes, very manual. I have, and that's a script that I will share. I'll send it through to Nate and he can email it out. I've got a script that will back up all document libraries and all lists to a CSV file. So you don't get the history and you don't get a lot of the metadata on documents, but if it's a raw backup of files or list data, like actual list rows, it's really useful for that.
Awesome. Christine adds, super useful. Are there any other questions for Suzanne? All right, well, I think that's it. Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. I know I really enjoyed it, and let's see. Greg also adds, it's great to see this stuff in practice. There's lots of automation possibilities. Yeah, that flow stuff was incredible.
So yeah, if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Whether it's on Twitter or LinkedIn, please do.
All right, thanks so much, Suzanne, and thank you everybody who joined us. Again, watch your email for that recording. We'll see you next week. We have another meeting for Power BI dashboards. That's on the 11th. So watch your email for more info on that. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.